I made some
quite
notes.
a random thing.
I won't do too much with them, I don't
Fancy an egg sandwich.
Okay, right everyone, we'll make a start, shall we? Now, we haven't planned anything too definite here tonight, so what I suggest is that Johnny and I will have a brief chat about some points that arose from viewing the film just now, and then we'll turn it all over to you. So if anyone's got any questions or anyone wants to pick up on anything we're saying, then feel free, because we're going to come back to you for questions in a moment or two. Okay? Right, well, let's start. First of all, it's quite some film, isn't it? You know, it's a very different kind of film, and it's a film that fits very clearly into a British alternative filmmaking tradition, but obviously overlaps very strongly with British theatre tradition as well. Clearly it's a film based on words, very strongly on words, but also very clearly on characters. Some of the reviews for this have talked very strongly about its staginess, haven't they? And in some cases, some people have cast that as a criticism. In other cases, people have seen it for what I clearly think it is from having watched it just now with the rest of you, a film which is very clearly in the stage tradition, but also in a very strong satire tradition, a tradition of mocking the mores of the day, which has always predominantly been the role of the playwright. It's certainly something Burns did in his time. He took the mick out of the establishment figures of his time. Holy Willie's Prayer is absolutely a case of that kind of thing. And there is a continuity going on here, particularly in the sort of everyman hero that we've got at the centre of this film, whom I think is probably a little bit unjustly treated by being called Vic Tim. So let's start with that kind of premise overall. We were just chatting a second ago, Johnny, weren't we, about the kind of signifiers that you find in this film. I mean, I felt particularly the character of God is interestingly cast, because we're used to a much more certain God, aren't we? We're used to a God who understands what he's doing, is in charge of things. And this God stands up and says, oh my God, I made a mistake. And at other times, he's clearly making mischief deliberately. And that takes us back to an image of a controlling destiny, which gets back to things like Chaucer, things like the mystery plays, things like the Norse legends and Loki and the mischief makers and Puck in Shakespeare, people like that. So let's start with that. First of all, do you see yourself making a commentary like that in terms of who should be in charge of our lives? Or are you making a picture of all the little characters that you see in today's world who deserve a bit of mocking?
Well, I think I'm an atheist. I don't actually believe in God. I think, so therefore I'm not going to write a God that is going to subscribe to the mores that a lot of people think God does. And I delighted in creating a God who was quite clearly winging it. I mean, when I wrote the synopsis and wrote treatments for people, I just said, you know, he's as useless and lazy as the rest of us, basically. And I would love to lay claim to having been influenced by the mystery plays and Loki, the god of mischief, apart from the fact that I only heard of them this evening. So, so if I can be a bit revisionist about it, yes. But I think it's very interesting, the person, because of the fact that in this film, until the end, Godfrey doesn't really interact with anybody. He's pretty much, he appears, everybody else, you probably noticed everyone's frozen all the time. And therefore, he kind of exists outside of whatever the atmosphere I was trying to get with everybody else. And the sort of calibre of actors that we shortlisted, that we wanted to play Godfrey, you were always going to get their version of it. And what you get there is you get Simon's version of it. And you don't really direct Simon, to be honest. You kind of let Simon get on with it. You film him. You don't really direct him. You can to a certain extent, but you got Simon's Godfrey, and Simon's Godfrey is playing him. I think there's elements of it in there where he's almost turning into Frankie Howard. But he plays it very much. He plays up the sort of because Simon is so bombastic, but what Godfrey is saying is clearly nonsense a lot of the time. You get a buffoon, basically, somebody who's terribly self-assured in what they're saying, but we all can see that it's not. But also, when you have the bits where Godfrey loses control, which are my favourite bits, really, when something happens and he goes, oh, fiery tumult, twisted plot, and you go, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be in control of this, and then he gathers it together and goes, oh, now you can see the entire lot. And the way that Simon did that, he got. There were times where Simon was delivering the lines, and I was going, "Can we just do that again? Can we do that about 3 times the speed?" Because so it was delighting in every word, stuff like that. But actually, it works. It works because it makes God even more of a buffoon. Whereas if he did say the things and I'd got my way, it would have probably been useless. And that's the case with a lot of the performances in the film, really. But so I guess in answer to your question. He is. I didn't consciously channel anything. I'd love to say I did, but I sort of wrote this character quite instinctively, and then Simon delivered it in his way. But like you said, it's almost impossible not to be even unconsciously influenced by certain other things potentially.
Well, that's one of the things I really got from it, is you've got a set of character types in your people there. So leaving aside the theology, you've done clearly a snapshot of types in our society. They're all recognisable.
Cliches, absolutely, they are cliches, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure they're completely cliches.
Well, caricatures, they're certainly
types,
very broad types, yeah.
So where did they come from?
I started writing this, the reason that Vic is Scottish is I started writing this. I went to... there was a girl that I was seeking the attentions of, and she was an actress, and she was in a play at the Sits in Glasgow. And so I came up to Glasgow for the weekend, and was one of the payback was I had to go and see the performance both nights. And it was a play by Racine called Britannicus, which is written in verse. And I went to see it 2 nights running, and I didn't understand a word of it. And it was really inscrutable, and I've never really read a great deal of Shakespeare. I had to do some Shakespeare for English O and A level, but I never really got it. And but I've always liked writing in rhyme, essentially because of songwriting, and always loved a limerick. Actually, I've always loved a limerick. And I sat down in the morning. I had a day to kill in Glasgow. And I sat down having a coffee in the morning, and I just started writing. I was just musing on stuff, and I started writing this. Hello, how's your day? Swings and roundabouts, light and shade. This way, and I just started. But whereas normally I'd write for about 10 minutes, and then I'd finish the coffee and I'd go somewhere more interesting. I stayed there for hours, and I ended up writing about 20 pages. And in the course of that, had introduced in that first morning pretty much all of the characters that are there. And I think it was their types, because I started writing this thing about fate, and it was you were assembling, and I think tonally I kind of knew what it was even then. It was you were assembling this bunch of archetypes, and the fact that it was at a country house hotel, but it was a motivational sales conference, and I don't know, the geezers, the sexually predatory girl, the estate agent who was a bit, and they just came out, and they pretty much were there right from the beginning. And it's interesting because I think, having had the benefit now of the wisdom of lots of film reviewers, who some of whom loved, some of whom hated, but there were people saying that I had lost all sense of reality at various points, and I was going, what do you mean, all sense of reality? This never had any sense of reality. This was always ludicrous. I elected to shoot it in a certain way, and I elected to make their performances quite realistic. I think I tried to keep it relatively low-key in terms of the performances, other than Simon. I didn't want people capering around like it was Now the Nateborn, and I tried to keep it down. And interestingly, Harry was being a comedian. Harry was wanting to up the comedy all the time, and it was very difficult. And it was the most difficult thing for me in terms of the directing it. Actually, was having a hugely experienced and very funny man, which Harry is when he's on set, a comic actor, going, wow, that'd be funnier if you did that, and that'd be funnier, and going, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to make a gag when he's with Celia, because they don't really make gags with the actors. The situation is ridiculous, and what happens is ridiculous, but I tried not to, and of course there are some people who go, oh, you missed a trick there, it might have been funnier, whereas I wanted to keep tonally in a certain area. But I'm gone right off the subject now, I've got no idea what I'm talking about. But I think the characters, the archetypes, are broad. They're very broad. Jackie's very broad. Terry and Phil are very broad. Vic's not really. He is every man in a way, but in that respect, he's almost sort of turbocharged dull in some respects. So actually, he is quite, because of so again, some critics of the film have said, oh, the charisma-free Ian Robertson, and you kind of think, you kind of missed the point. He's supposed to be. That's why he wears a grey suit, and a very dull tie, and he drives a Mondeo. Sorry, no offence meant. But that's his archetype, is that he is quite a regular guy.
I thought you'd established that by having him naked right at the start.
Well,
yes, completely without any pretension whatsoever.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and everyone else is costumed.
Yeah.
And gets more and more extreme costumed as the play goes on.
Yeah.
They have different changes, don't they?
Yeah.
Putting the woman in red at the end.
Absolutely. The colour palette gets stronger. Yeah.
Right. That's the other thing I suppose we should get onto is this is a film that's made of tonality, isn't it? If you are starting with dialogue, which you clearly are, with the words. Shakespeare uses rhyming couplets for jokes, for interplay between people, and for the ends of scenes, for closure. And I noticed that you end all of your scenes, when you go from one scene to the next, somebody says, oh, right, now it's night, or, oh, let's go and have lunch, or something like that.
Yeah, it's very heightened.
Distinctions for
this,
yeah. Because that's when a couplet really gives you a closure, and gives you a stop.
Yeah.
And what it militates against usually is conversation. And I felt that in many places there you manage conversation very well by overlapping the ends of the lines. So when you watch it, you hardly get the sense that there is a rhyming pattern going on. There's a rhythmic pattern going on, but not a rhyming pattern as such. And I think that comes partly out of your actors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So how much of that was, and that must have been a problem to wrestle with in filming it, because obviously fixed line length gives you a real harsh discipline to work with.
What happened in the casting process was it became really obvious who could handle it and what I would call slip the rhymes, slip the word endings. And I tried, I found on the first draft I'd written, everything was very ch-chun. I then did another pass where I went, no, break, wrap the rhyme round halfway to the next, don't always let the same person finish their own, and I tried to really, really make it much more interesting in that way. But there were the cast almost cast themselves when they came in, because there were certain people that could just really nail it. Terry and Phil were interesting. Terry particularly, because I needed Terry to have a physical, the big geezer. He needed to have a physical presence. They are my brief to both of them was, right, you both kill people for a living, but Terry, you do it for a job. Phil, you do it even if you didn't get paid for it, because you do actually just like doing it. And he's like the terrier. But I wanted them to have that physical difference, the energy difference. But getting a big geezer who could handle the verse wasn't that easy. And I'd seen Ian Burfield in a film called, was it Tomorrow La Scala, about the inmates who do an opera in a prison. I think it was called that anyway. And I'd seen Ian in that, and he plays a prison warder, and he's really like that, but you could see he makes really good choices, and he's really interesting the way he thinks. And you just went, he's got to do it. And the same with Jay. I'd seen Jay Simpson in Shifty, and knew that he had that real nasty little like terrier thing, And then he came and just read it and just nailed it. And Michael Wildman, similarly, who plays Jamie, I looked at probably 20 different actors until Michael came in one day, and it was just like, oh, you absolutely got it. And that's, you know, that's what it is. You it's a very specific requirement, you know. And there, like, you know, I said to you earlier when I was talking about, there was one actor who will be nameless, but wasn't in the main cast, who came in and said, I said, right, are we okay? Because we're going to run the lines in a minute. And he goes, yeah, I'm just going to play around with them a bit, though. I'm going to, you know, sort of like pick it up, move it around. And I was like, right, okay. And so we fed him a line, and he sort of improvised some stuff. And he went, yeah, I think that works. I said, well, it doesn't rhyme. Yeah, but it kind of was like more what my character would say. And it's like, no, it isn't. And in the end, it was one occasion you had to go, look, please just read what's on the page. I promise you it'll work, you know. But it was just finding people that could, and all the time just saying to people, I was saying to people about the rhyme, play the meaning of the line, not the music. Don't to-chun. I said, I never want people to go, hang on a minute, that there's a way of doing it where you just feint round and just add a little bit of weight to give a clue as to where the rhyme is. I mean, there are a couple of places where, you know, even I watch it and go, I know there is a rhyme in there somewhere, but I can't think what it is. But that's not really the point, you know.
No, because it's carrying forward at that point
Sure,
when you have
sure.
conversation going on. Okay, I think we've probably talked enough about general background there. So can we come over to you now? So has anyone got a particular question out of any of this? Mm-hmm. Please.
Did I like any of them? What, the actors or the... yeah, I do. I think that Jackie is fabulous. I think that Vic's a good sort. I think in some respects.
To the point that I discovered he was married, and then I thought he was just as bad as the whole lot.
You're an absolutist, aren't you? God, no shades of grey with you. Yeah, well, I mean, you wouldn't have liked the earlier draft I wrote then when his wife turned up with the kids, but you only know, especially when you're making a film on this budget and in the time that we had, not that one wishes to make excuses, but you make decisions and you get to the end and you go, okay, because I think, you know, having made like music for a long time, and I think you only ever make a version of what you do. You don't definitively ever do anything, and I think I watch this, there's so many things that I would, for actually quite fundamental things that I would do differently, in terms of, I mean, it's the first long form thing I've ever written. I've actually written a couple of feature scripts now since, and I'm about to make something longer form, and I look at this now and I go, structure wise, there are definitely some things it all comes to an end and then it all kicks off again. But in a way, I'm just saying, technically, some people would say that's actually, there's a bit of a false ending, but actually, the only thing that matters, I think, from the point of view of an audience is, do you want to keep watching? It's like a script. Do you want to keep turning the page? And people go, oh yeah, well this is in the wrong page and that's at the wrong point. And you go, yeah, but did you want to keep turning the page? And I agree with you about Brad. But actually, no, he doesn't, does he? The receptionist, Angelo, doesn't interact with Godfrey. He's just with Simon all the time, the concierge. But yeah, the Brad thing, yeah, you could have.
Can I just say, I read that differently. I mean, it's the first time I've seen this film like everyone else did today too, so I'm reacting as a consumer, obviously.
Sure.
Obviously the fatalism and the predestination stuff is what goes with a God figure, but the other great motif here is the tarot cards, isn't there? The chance element, the uncertain bit. And I felt, I got the sense that the Bradley character spoke to Godfrey because you need two people for the tarot setting. You need to plant them out and you need to explain it. And I thought he was the vision.
Yeah, you see, well, the next Q&A I do in a couple of weeks' time, obviously that's what I'll say.
I
That's the
felt
beauty
that
of it.
foregrounded the idea of chance that you brought up.
Yeah.
Because your God is fallible.
Well, God would have been playing
Clearly
patience,
is.
wouldn't he? If
Yes.
he'd have been sitting there just doing it on his own, you know.
But that's... Sorry, please.
The location. Where did you, why, how did you choose that location?
To get the film funded, I sent the script out to a few people and it was just impossible. I mean, if people think it's a difficult watch, it's sending the script to people, it was just, you were relying on people's ability. I knew that this could be done in such a way, or I hoped it could be done in such a way that the dialogue could fly and could move. But when people read it, they went, dun 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 dun. They go, it's a bit lumpen. You go, Well, when I read it to people, I did quite a few readings where I'd have like 6 or 7 people round, and you just read it, and every single time people go, God, it really works, and you can see where the interest dies and where it doesn't. But so I decided to make a couple of test films, and I shot one of the mornings where he wakes up and puts the TV on, because I wanted people to see the TV interaction. I thought it'd be just quite an interesting bit of visual stuff. And I shot the restaurant scene with the pair of them talking. And a mate of mine who's a first AD, first assistant director, who was helping me do the tests, said, oh, I know this really good hotel in Windsor called the Oakley Court. So we went and had a look at it, and I walked and I just looked at the hotel from the outside, and I just thought, this is amazing. And up till that point, I had described the hotel in the script as being a dull, faceless 1970s corporate, like a THF or something. And I'm really... Then we found the Oakley Court, and I went through and I changed it, and there were it actually knocks on quite a bit with what you're writing in that respect, because I'd written it as much more as this awful place where Alan Partridge lived, you know.
Yes.
And then saw the Oakley Court, and you suddenly went, it is like God's waiting room, this place, it's incredible. And then I met the hotel manager, and everything fell into place. It's independently owned, so it wasn't part of a chain, because there's no way a chain would have given you permission to shoot. It was independently owned, and the manager was a real film buff. And as soon as I said, oh, I'm scouting locations for his film, he said, oh, we had the Hammer House of Horror films made here. And I was at the office, and all the stills came out of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And then, oh, yeah, the Rocky Horror Picture Show was shot here and everything. And he just said, I said, look, I'd like to come and do a test. And they fell over themselves to help. And it was literally just me with a camera like this, and a couple of mates and the actors. And actually a different actor playing Vic at that time. And so we did the tests, and then when it came to when I found the money for the film, that doing those tests led to the guy Tony who put the money up, and then we went to them and said, look, we'd like to do, we've scheduled the film, we'd like to do it. It's going to be 16 days, and the film we agreed with the hotel. So yeah, it was very fortunate. It was actually really from a logistical point of view, getting a working hotel was a gift in that I rewrote it, because that was originally called, the hotel was called Willows. And I just thought it was the sort of thing, welcome to Willows, sir. It would just be some awful corporate place. And then, of course, we had to make it welcome to Oakley Court, because what that bought us was signage,
yes,
dressing gowns, logos. And we just thought it's a no-brainer. Why not just change it to the name of the hotel? And they... when we were saying, oh, you can have film showings of it here and all that, and they went, yeah, great. So that was good. But what it brought in some areas, that saved us a lot on our art department budget. It brought huge problems because it's a working hotel. It's 150 years old. The conference room, which we shot the first 4 days, we shot all the conference scenes, which was actually really stressful, because your first 4 days, I'd never directed a film before, I've done a bit of TV, but your first 4 days on a feature film with a crew of 40 people, you're in a room half the size of this with 10 actors for 4 days running, and it was just like, I was like a sort of rabbit in the headlights. But there's a corridor right above where we are with people going up and down it constantly. So you're trying to work through swathes of dialogue, and this is, you hear every like and we didn't cut, and I was just making pencil marks where there was a noise, and I'd be going, right, we need to go there, we need to redo that line, redo that line. It was really arduous. And the other, even worse than that, we were in one conference room, and when you see Brad, the sales trainer, there's like wooden panelling behind him. The other side of that panelling, the boys from Morphy Richards are having their end of year conference. And I'm not joking, every 15 minutes, you know, Dave sold a toaster or whatever, and they, oh, you know, we'd be like, oh. It was just like, and the actors were amazing, because the problem with that happens when you're running long dialogue scenes, which we were, is they start clapping, and if you cut, then all of a sudden hair and makeup and everybody's in there and the tension gets lost, and then you suddenly find yourself going back to the beginning of the take again. And so I just said to everyone, look, if we get noise, don't cut, just be calm for 15 seconds and we'll pick up again. And that's what we did as a sort of a working method all the way through, is we wouldn't cut, because we're shooting, it's high def, so we're not shooting film. You couldn't do that if you're shooting 35mm film, but we're shooting high def video, so stock doesn't really cost money. So that's what we did, but it was really stressful for everyone for days on end, because there were, you know, and we'd say to the hotel, that was an even worse sound problem, the night scene where Vic is drunk and he comes up to the reception, which again I love, because he comes up and the receptionist is a mate of mine, Max, who I love. He's the only one I said, you can actually play the comedy, because he's like a naughty boy who's out of control. And when Vic comes up to him and he goes, I'm rushed off my feet and I'm here on my own, and he's done, and it's all the good ideas were all the actors' ones. When Vic walks towards him, he said, I've got a great idea, and he just starts polishing the bell like that, and it was just so rubbish. But while we were doing that scene, we were shooting on Saturday night, and Kenny Ball and his jazz men were playing downstairs. Because we codded that reception up. That reception isn't actually on the ground floor next to the front doors. It's actually a lobby, a hallway up on the first floor landing. And we put a sort of reception desk in. And for 3 or 4 hours, we had Kenny Paul and his jazz men, and we had runners trying to shut the doors, and the hotel management coming up, and they were saying, we're going to stop you filming, we're going to shut you down. And it was having to go down there and explain to Kenny Ball that we were trying to make a film and everything. It was quite bizarre, really. And then there was, when we shot the lobby scene, all the stuff that's in the lobby was pretty much done with the old ladies and everything. It was all shot in one hit, all the lobby stuff. There was a funeral, a wake going on. And so the wake, all the people from the wake were having to walk across our, dolly where the camera's being moved around and stuff. So it was pretty chaotic. But
for a small independent film, was it very difficult to get the big names on board?
No.
That they just kind of beat a path to your door?
They didn't beat a path to our door, but the names that we wanted, and we wanted, Simon was the obvious. Yeah, there's 3 or 4 people that could have been Godfrey, and they were all equal. And we chose to go in a certain order, and Simon said yes, so Simon was Godfrey. Fortunately, I happened to know somebody who knew Celia's agent and got a script to Celia, and she said yes straight away. She absolutely loved it. And so Harry was, or is, the next door neighbour of the guy that funded the film. And a really good mate. The guy that funded the film is a guy called Tony Schlesinger, and who I met about 8 years ago through some friends one day. Just had lunch and got chatting about music and football and stuff, and we just got on and stayed in touch. And whenever I did, if I had some, made a record or did some radio or TV or something, I'd always let him know, and he'd always email back. And he's fairly wealthy, and I sent Tony the test films, and slightly disingenuously said, if you know anyone who might be interested in funding a film. And but then Tony said, oh, my mate Harry would, I've told him about it, and he's quite interested in playing a part. And he went, yeah, Harry Enfield. And I went, right. And he was talking about playing Godfrey. And I said, I can't really see it. And I said, well, what about? And I'd originally written Malcolm as even more of a caricature. I'd written Malcolm almost like the Major from Fawlty Towers, and probably 15, 20 years older, and really, sort of that sort of con man. And and then I said to Tony, well, maybe he could read Malcolm, and he read it, and then he came in and we had a read through, and he was fantastic, and he'd had this idea, and again I have claimed this as my idea in the past, but I can't really because it's being filmed and Harry might see it. Harry came up and he said, I've been thinking about, I keep thinking about Jeffrey Archer, and I thought that's brilliant, and he does. He's got that thing that's like the rimless glasses and the and we sort of compromised a bit because Harry, of course, being an actor, is quite vain, so he wanted to look quite cool, and he had this sort of safari suit that he wanted to wear and everything. I said, no, you've got to look like man at CNA. You've got to have regimental tie, tweed jacket, because you've got to appeal to a certain sort of lady that it finds that very reassuring. And if you're a bit outre and you're not going to appeal to the Celia character, if you're terribly urbane, it's not going to really work. So we argued about that. And but I think Harry was, I think in a way actually it's the most. I think he's the most surprising role in it in a way, because it's not what you expect to see Harry doing. He was great, really good.
His character gets a reference to Terry Thomas in the script, doesn't he?
Mm.
Was that there before you cast Harry, or did that come about as a reference?
No, and actually, interestingly, another thing that Harry and I disagreed with, but he didn't want to wear the moustache, and I said, no, I think you need to have the moustache, because actors often do that. They want to look good. They don't always fully think what's appropriate to the character. I think everybody likes to look, and nobody wants to have a tash and sort of be. We made Harry basically look 10 years older. Yeah. Harry's actually, he's quite. Oh, he's quite young. He's quite vital. He's very vital as well. The other thing about Harry, he's very fit. He goes to the gym a lot, and when he came in to do the read through, he's in his cycling shorts and his sort of sleeveless vest, and he's got muscles. And I was like, who's that? It's Harry Enfield on someone else's body, and so you kind of have to disguise that because that's totally inappropriate for Malcolm, and so. So it's all those, those processes of thinking when an actor comes in and says, I want to do this, and you go, okay, that's not how I've seen it, and you have to think, is it better or not? And sometimes you go, yeah, great, that's a brilliant idea, but other times you have to go, no, really, really going to go, and that's where we probably disagreed on the sort of comic tone. So I was always trying to go, because Harry's really funny. Yes. I mean, when he's on set, he was doing this whole thing. When the scene on the park bench when he's got the holdall with the money that he nicks, he kept doing this thing, and he's sitting there, and we were under huge time pressure all the time. It was so bam, 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 just like constantly scene, knocking out. And Harry's sitting there, and he's got this bag under his arm, and every time I cut, he'd go, and he's actually a brilliant ventriloquist. He was doing this whole thing that there was someone in the bag, and everybody was absolutely falling over, laughing. And I'm sort of going, and you don't want to be the one that keeps having to go. And the first AD's laughing, and I'm sort of going, come on, you're supposed to be moving this on, Yes. It's really, but yeah, no, he's very, very, very funny guy, and I think he's brilliant in it. But so, no, we were quite lucky that the people that we sent the script out to, a lot of the actors love getting their teeth into something like this as well. I think the actors were really, it was quite a breath of fresh air.
I suppose their fees were reasonably low too, for an independent film like that.
Everybody was equity minimum. There was, every single actor was paid equity minimum. Yeah. We didn't have, and it actually becomes quite an easy conversation though. When you've got your budget, however small, in place, but you haven't cast anybody, it's a much easier conversation. Agents quite like it. If you just go to an agent and go, right, we're shooting from February the 9th to March the 8th, this is how much money it is, we're going to need them for that many days, can they do it or not? And a lot of independent filmmakers, I think it's a mistake to try and attach names too early. A lot of people do it because they think they're going to get their budget, but in reality it doesn't really work always unless you've got somebody huge. But what you get then is you suddenly get, it's a bit like going house hunting before you've sold your house. You fall in love with another house and you just keep getting disappointed. So you go out and you get a person and they go, yeah, I'll be attached to your film. And then you get somebody else and then they go off and do a film, so all of a sudden they're gone for 2 months. So what do you then say to people, all the people that you've been trying to get excited and get on board because you've been saying X is attached? You then have to go and say, you either have to put it off for 3 months, and your momentum can get fatally, because getting a film like this going, so much of it is to do with momentum. Trying to get everything to happen at the same time and just push and keep going. You know, we lost a couple of people quite late on, because if somebody gets a big film, then they're being paid properly for it, they're going to do it, you know. And you just have to go, right, boom, recast, you know. And but I thought it was really, really vital. And at one point somebody was saying, you know what, it might be easier to buy ourselves some time and knock back 2 months. And I was adamant, and I think it would have been a problem, because I think we'd have lost a couple of the actors, and then some of the crew would have gone. You know, our director of photography, cameraman, was getting us a fantastic deal for all our camera gear, and if we hadn't got him, he was off doing commercials again. So, you know, it really is, you're in the lap of the gods a bit, but you have to hold your nerve as well, and just go, right, we're just going to drive and get this done in this time frame.
This is the skill of the producer, isn't it, essentially? Which is slightly different from the skill of the actor or all the other dramatic elements that are in there.
Yeah.
And it's very much about keeping that pattern going.
Sure.
I'm struck particularly by, it's a British feature, a British characteristic of a part of the British film world, that actors have always done small movies, have always done independent movies. And it's not seen as a downward step in your career or anything like that. In America, there is a very clear career path. You do better movies and bigger movies and get paid more, etc. In Britain, there's always been this jobbing actor tradition, isn't there, of I do everything. We're gambling that this guy's going to be a big director one day and I'll be on his early show reel, and that'll be an important thing. That happens sometimes. But B, it's also that experiments can work, and experiments can become markers in film history. And I have this vague sense that this film could possibly end up in that bracket. Okay, do we have any other questions?
What's the next project?
Ah, yes.
I'm about to shoot a short film, what you call a long form short film, like a 26-minute film that I've written, which is called Wonder, and it takes place in one evening. It's about 4 couples who are all in various sort of stages of relationship breakdown, for one or not, but they're all brought together by something that happens, and all of their relationships are changed as a result of it. And it's, until last week, it had a terribly, terribly sad ending, and now it has a very, very, very lovely ending. But I'll probably go back again. But I'm doing that, and I'm. It's difficult to talk about what you're prospectively doing because you're having conversations with people, but I've finished what was a feature script, but I've reformatted it as a 3-part, 3 hours for TV, which I'm speaking to a couple of people about. And I'm literally on the train on the way up here. I've started writing I've had an film idea for about 4 years, called Goodbye Mother, which is basically it takes place in one day, and in the morning there's an old couple, and she wakes up in the morning and has a brain hemorrhage, and all the family gather at her bedside, and by the end of the film she dies, but the whole family dynamic has changed completely. And what you get basically you have 50 years history of this 2 parents and 4 children, and I'm writing it. I think it's going to be 6-hour episodes, and each one will be largely based around each of the children and the parents. But it's really early stages. So, but they all seem to have quite a strong similarity of interconnection and secrets and lies.
Are you expecting to play with other non-realist modes at all?
I've been working on an idea with a German friend of mine, Torsten, who did all the graphics for this. I met Torsten, I did a TV series in 2006 for BBC Three, a comedy sketch show. It was quite surreal. And Torsten did all the graphics for that. And we get on really well. He's a fabulous guy. And I've been working on this idea. Again, it's a suite of people who are all brought together and meet on a tube train, and at the beginning of the day, and then they all go off and spend their day, and we follow them, and then they're all brought back onto the same tube train at the end of the day, but all of their experiences have changed massively because of what's happened to them that day. And at the beginning of the film, we track along them, and we hear their interior monologue, and we haven't got a clue what any of it means. And at the end of the film, we track along and we hear their interior monologues, and we're going, "It's her over there," but it's basically looking at the fact that. Do you ever think when you walk around a city, or if you meet somebody, you finally meet somebody, everybody's very keen on going, "Isn't it a coincidence that we met in that bar that day?" But I'm fascinated by the near misses that we have. Every day we could almost meet somebody that would completely change our lives massively. I know it's probably stating the obvious, and I've just got a working title at the moment. I call it Thin Glass Walls. But I imagine watching. Sometimes you meet somebody and you go, "I wonder what it would have been like if we could have seen a heat-seeking map of us. How many times did we nearly intersect, or did we intersect?" And I'm sort of quite fascinated by that. But we're talking about doing it and actually trying to show graphically actually how thought processes and how the brain processes things, and actually making it quite fantastical so that things will completely split apart, and you'll actually be within the thought process of the person, so it will become quite surreal. But it's really early stages, and we keep throwing things back and forth to Cologne and London, so I don't know. It's not going to be an easy one to fund, that.
This is starting to sound like Dennis Potter.
I'm going to get sponsorship from Muller Yogurt for that one.
Okay, well, let's just come to a closing question then. Obviously, there is an element here. This is an experimental film to some degree. As an experiment, do you think it works?
I don't think that's really for me to say. I mean, I think some people have said it has no place being on film, and I think that's a bit harsh. I don't think I've created film some great disservice with it. I think, is it experimental? I suppose it is experimental in that there hasn't been an original screenplay written in rhyming couplets, but as a couple of people have said, maybe there's a very good reason. But I don't know. I think it's a much simpler question, is do the audience that see it enjoy watching it? That for me is, there are so many films. I think this is, this is my bugbear in this country, is that we seem to have critic films.
Yes.
That you go and watch them, or I go and watch them, and I go, I don't want to spend 90 minutes in the company of that. And at the end of the day, to use another cliche, this is entertainment. If it's not entertainment, then what is it? What is it? Punishment? Is it whiling away time? No, we're all time short. So therefore, you want people to want to be in the company of your film. So I don't know. I mean, I can't sit and be objective about it at all. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I made it, and I feel in one way I feel quite proud of having done it, because it's bloody hard getting a film made in this country, basically, and I'd like to be able to make another one, but I probably won't make it in rhyming verse.
Okay, well,
But
thanks very much.
can I say thank you as well to all of you for coming out and seeing it? And it really is, it's lovely to see a theatre of people who not only have sat through it, but then had the opportunity to run away and didn't. So, thank you all very much.
Right, thank you then.
And thanks to Graham as well.